globe showing Europe-Africa the battle for the crown. The rain poured heavily over the Johnson mansion, beating against the glass windows like 1,000 angry fists. Inside, thunder wasn't just in the sky, it was in the living room. Voices clashed, echoing off the marble walls. Grace, the first wife, stood tall in her royal blue wrapper, her hands shaking as she pointed at Catherine, the youngest wife. "You think your son would take my husband's throne? Never. The first son inherits everything by right, by tradition, by destiny." Evelyn, the second wife, smirked, folding her arms. "Tradition. Don't deceive yourself, Grace. Everyone knows the company needs competence, not just birthright. Richard is the only one with real experience. Your son Daniel is nothing but a hothead, and Catherine's boy is still a child." Catherine said nothing. She only held her son Michael's hand, her eyes firm but calm, her silence louder than their shouting. At the far end of the room sat Mr. Johnson, frail, his once strong shoulders bent under the weight of sickness and years of empire building. His walking stick tapped the floor, but his wives ignored him, drowning his silence in their chaos. That night, after the storm of voices, Mr. Johnson sat alone in his study, staring at an old portrait of himself as a young man, filled with fire, ambition, and hope. His heart was heavy, not with the sickness eating his body, but with the war tearing his family apart. He thought of his sons. Daniel, the firstborn. Tall, confident, and dangerously brilliant. Daniel spoke like a man with fire on his tongue. He could inspire a Rome, challenge traditions, and fight for justice. But Daniel's fire was also his weakness. He was too radical, too quick to fight, too unwilling to bend. In business, one reckless decision could burn an empire to the ground. Richard, the second son. Calm, calculating, and competent. He was already handling some branches of the company with skill. But his weakness was hidden in a bottle. Whiskey was his quiet master. Mr. Johnson had watched him stumble out of meetings, losing contracts not because of incompetence, but because of carelessness fueled by drink. Michael, the last son. Quiet, reserved, but brilliant. He was like water, calm on the surface, deep and strong underneath. He listened, he learned, and unlike his brothers, he carried discipline like a shield. His humility often made people underestimate him, but Mr. Johnson saw something in him the others could not. 3 sons. 1 throne. How could a father choose without tearing his family apart? While the sons carried their burdens, their mothers began their battles in secret. Grace, the first wife, could not accept that Daniel might lose his inheritance. She remembered her youth, how she stood by Mr. Johnson when he had nothing but a bicycle and a dream. She had been the first to suffer with him, the first to believe in him. If Daniel does not inherit, she thought, then all my sacrifice was in vain. So, one dark night, she traveled to the outskirts of the city. The shrine was hidden deep in the forest, lit with red candles and marked by symbols of power. The herbalist, with eyes that glowed like fireflies, listened as Grace poured out her fears. "I want my son to rise above the others," she whispered. The herbalist smiled, mixing powders and blood in a clay pot. "Then you must give me something, your trust, your loyalty, and a sacrifice." In another part of the city, Evelyn, the second wife, also burned with desperation. She had tasted the sweetness of wealth and could not bear the thought of losing her position if Richard was overlooked. In a dimly lit room, she sat with another herbalist. "My son is the only one who can lead," she said firmly. The herbalist handed her a white cloth. "Tie this around his wrist. It will bind his destiny to greatness." Evelyn left with trembling hands, fear mixed with greed in her heart. But Catherine, the youngest wife, chose a different path. She was not blind to the battles around her, but her faith stood firm. She and Michael went to a small church outside town. The building was old, its paint peeling, its benches cracked, but the air was thick with hope. They knelt at the altar, and Catherine prayed through tears. God, if leadership will destroy him, take it away. But if it is his destiny, then let no darkness stop him. Michael, though young, closed his eyes, whispering softly, let your will be done. 3 women. 3 altars. 3 destinies colliding. The days that followed tested the sons. Daniel began to speak bolder in company meetings, challenging board members, and demanding change. His brilliance impressed, but his radical ideas scared investors. Some whispered, if this boy takes over, he will burn everything his father built. Richard worked hard, taking on new contracts and showing great promise. But one evening, after securing a major deal, he celebrated too hard. He arrived drunk at an important dinner with foreign investors, slurring his words, embarrassing his father's name. News spread quickly, and doubts about his discipline grew louder. Michael remained quiet but steady. He studied, learned the company's history, read late into the night, and asked wise questions. Employees respected him for his humility. Unlike his brothers, he never demanded loyalty, he earned it. Unseen, their mother's choices began to show. Daniel's anger grew sharper, Richard's weakness deeper. Michael, instead of stumbling, seemed shielded, as though unseen hands were guiding him. Then came the day the empire trembled. Mr. Johnson collapsed during a board meeting. He was rushed to the hospital, his body frail, his heart failing. Rumors spread, the chairman is dying. Stocks wavered, investors panicked, and employees whispered, who will lead us now? At the hospital, the 3 wives gathered, each clinging to hope and fear. The sons stood by their father's bedside, silent, knowing the decision of a lifetime was near. Mr. Johnson called for his lawyer and board members. His voice was weak, but his mind was sharp. This company, he said slowly, was built not just with wealth, but with sweat, blood, and discipline. It needs a leader, not just an heir. He turned first to Daniel. You are brilliant, my son. But your anger blinds you. A leader cannot burn what he seeks to build. You are not ready. Daniel clenched his fists, his heart breaking. Then he turned to Richard. You are competent, and your skills are strong. But discipline is the crown of leadership. Without it, an empire will fall. Alcohol has changed you, my son. I cannot hand over this legacy to weakness. Richard bowed his head, tears filling his eyes. Finally, Mr. Johnson looked at Michael. His voice softened. You are young, yet wisdom speaks through you. You listen, you learn, and you act with discipline. This empire will stand in your hands. You are my choice. The room fell silent, broken only by the sound of Grace and Evelyn's cries of anger. Grace screamed, "This is unfair. My son is the firstborn. Tradition gives him the right." Evelyn hissed, "This is corruption. Catherine bewitched you with her prayers." The 2 women attacked Catherine with words, but Catherine remained calm, holding Michael's hand. Mr. Johnson raised his hand one last time. I am not led by rituals. I am not led by quarrels. I am led by truth. And the truth is this: Michael is my heir. My decision is final. Daniel stormed out of the hospital room, his dreams shattered. Richard wept in silence, knowing his weakness had betrayed him. Catherine wept too, but hers was gratitude. Michael knelt, kissed his father's hand, and whispered, "Thank you, Father." Weeks later, Mr. Johnson passed away. The empire was left in Michael's care. The family never fully healed. The scars of rivalry remained. Mansion was silent the night Mr. Johnson finally closed his eyes. No more thunder, no more shouts of wives, no more heavy sighs of a man torn between love and legacy. Only silence, broken by the steady beeping of the hospital monitor that suddenly flatlined. Nurses rushed in, but Michael already knew. He held his father's hand tightly, tears rolling down his face. His two elder brothers stood behind, their expressions blank, grief mixed with an unspoken bitterness. The three wives wailed in different corners of the room, their voices piercing through the night. The lion of the family had fallen. Word spread quickly across the nation. Newspapers carried his photo on the front page: industrial titan, philanthropist, and billionaire, Mr. Johnson, 65, dies after short illness. Businessmen, governors, even foreign investors sent their condolences. Flags at his company's headquarters were lowered, and the entire city felt the weight of his departure. The burial was nothing short of majestic. He was laid to rest not in his hometown, but in the heart of his empire, a private mausoleum built inside the headquarters of Johnson Group Holdings. Thousands gathered, employees in uniforms, top dignitaries, and crowd of people whose lives he had touched. The compound was decorated with white flowers and golden drapes, symbolizing peace and honor. Traditional drummers played softly as prayers were offered, and his casket, lined with gold and white, was lowered into the marble tomb. His three wives stood apart, each dressed in mourning attire. Evelyn's eyes were sharp, scanning the crowd. Grace, the first wife, wept uncontrollably, her pride of being the first now dissolved into sorrow, while Lydia, the third wife, stood quietly, clutching a Bible close to her chest. Michael's two elder brothers wore dark suits, their faces stiff with pride, but their eyes betrayed their envy as they watched events unfold. After the burial, the board of directors called for an emergency meeting in the glass-walled boardroom overlooking the city skyline. The long mahogany table was surrounded by men and women in suits, each holding files and whispering about the future of the empire. At the head of the table sat Mr. Johnson's golden chair, draped with a white cloth in his honor. Then, with a firm but emotional voice, the company's legal advisor read the will. By the authority vested in me, I announce that Mr. Johnson's successor as chairman of the board of Johnson Group Holdings is his youngest son, Michael Johnson. The room fell silent. Michael, dressed in a simple black suit, stood up slowly. His hands trembled as he adjusted his tie, but his voice carried the calm strength of his father. My father built this empire with sweat, vision, and sacrifice. Today, I do not stand here because I am the youngest, nor because I am the favorite. I stand here because he believed I would protect this legacy. And I promise, with everything in me, that Johnson Group Holdings will continue to shine. Applause filled the room, though the faces of his elder brothers remained cold. Outside, journalists screamed questions as cameras flashed, capturing the new face of the empire. Employees cheered, chanting his name, Michael. 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 In that moment, as he looked up at his father's portrait on the wall of the boardroom, Michael knew his journey was just beginning. He was no longer just the humble son kneeling